Hey, welcome back to Evil's Comics. I'm Evil Mike, and I got a review for you. From DC Comics, this is Action Comics #1, released in June of 1938. This is the first appearance of Superman in comics. This is the facsimile edition, as a reprint. Of course, I don't have the real thing, being one of the most expensive comics to date. But for this guy, this is the first time I was getting to read this, and it was quite a surprise, but we'll get there. Superman, it's stated, and this is kind of new for me too, this is written and drawn by Jerome Siegel and Joe Shuster. I'm not used to the Jerome Siegel part. I would like to say that the whole comic and representation, like ads and everything, is exactly 100% accurate, but down here, this is the one modern thing you'll find besides the little barcode down here. But down here there is an important message that does state that, like, hey, this came from different times. This comic is left, in its accurate form, but, the world was in a different state kind of thing. There are some racial tones in the book, and it does give that warning for fair reason. But in Superman, there's not really that issue. There are some other issues. Like I said, it was a different time back then, but we'll get there. So the book starts out and it basically gives the explanation, and a very quick explanation, on Superman. Right here, it's these 3 panels, and it basically says he was an alien from a distant planet, and his parents basically had put him in a spaceship for some odd reasons. They sent him to Earth. He crash landed. A couple on Earth happened to find him, and then after a little bit of time, they realized that he had feats of strength. And that's kind of the whole backstory behind Superman. There's no mention of Krypton or Kryptonians, or that he's even at Krypton. It's very basic as far as like the beginning. They do go into some detail about his powers right here. It's these 4 panels, and most people know that old monocle, like faster than a speeding bullet. It's a little different, and on some points it got a little technical. It says, when maturity was reached, he discovered he could easily leap 1/8 of a mile, hurdle a 20-story building. So, I mean, he is kind of limited. He can only leap about 1/8 of a mile, not even basically like a block. He can raise tremendous weights, and he can run faster than an express train. And it says nothing less than a bursting shell can penetrate his skin. And I'm figuring shell, like artillery tank or something like that. I mean, you don't have shells and guns. They could have back then, maybe, I don't know. It does at the bottom kind of give you an explanation on how we can find these things in real life. They, talking about how ants can live up to 100 times their weight, and how grasshoppers can, basically jump blocks of distance at a time. And that's kind of all the backstory they give on Superman. The story jumps right into the story, kind of like midway into the story. And it starts off with one of the weirdest panels ever, but Superman is toting this girl who is all tied up. She is handkerchiefed, and her feet and legs tied up. He ends up and I think I said flying, he's jumping. But he ends up landing here, and he drops the girl off, and he tells her that they'll be back. He ends up going to this house, knocking on the door, and he's greeted by a butler. He's trying to see the governor, and the governor's asleep. And the butler tells him this, and Superman's like, but I gotta talk to him. He eventually busts down the door, and after, this guy tells him, hey, the governor's asleep, he's in his sleeping room, and Superman asks for this guy to show him the way. The guy says no, so Superman just picks him up and takes him with him. Eventually they come to a steel door, which happens to be the door to the governor's sleeping chambers, and the butler laughs. It's one of the points we get to see Superman's immense strength, because he just tears the door down and walks right in to talk to the governor. We find out the reason he's so, imperative to talk to the governor, but he basically has evidence that proves the innocence of a death row inmate who's about to be killed in about 15 minutes. Superman has the proof, and he's trying to get the governor to make the call to stop I guess now it would be murder. I keep saying murder. But basically at this time a death kind of time thing pops up with the 15-minute marker, and it goes down to 12, 9. But basically the governor comes to, listens to Superman. While this is going down, we do see that the good old butler was still trying to protect his governor, and he produces a gun. He does shoot Superman, which does nothing. Superman kind of laughs it off, takes the gun from the guy. At this time, the governor At the 9-minute mark, does actually finally get to read what Superman brought him, and he does make the call to, pardon the person that is about to be executed. At this time, Superman also does tell the governor that he has the guilty party already, in custody. That she is outside on his lawn, and then we find out that's who that Superman was toting in the beginning of the story. Superman kind of disappears in Batman fashion, and that's the last we hear of that part. The next day we find out that Clark Kent, Superman's alter ego, works at the Daily Star, not the Daily Planet, the Daily Star, and the first thing he does is checks the morning papers to find out the story about the governor and the innocent, the pardoned inmate, and he checks the paper to see if there's any mention of Superman, which there is not. Remember, this is his first appearance, so he's not really known around the city yet. He is called into by his editor-in-chief at the Daily Star, and he is basically given the task of trying to photograph Superman. Clark Kent stating if he can't, nobody else can. While he is there, he does they do get a tip that there is a domestic dispute going on in the city on the other side of town, and Superman quickly goes to, figure out if he needs to save the day kind of thing, and sure enough he does. It's one of the kind of more dark tones in the book. Even though there's no racial touchstones in this book, there is some kind of vulgarity towards women kind of thing. But basically we do come into the situation where a guy is beating his wife and they don't give a reason or anything. Superman quickly comes in and stops the guy from doing this. The guy eventually tries to stab Superman, and to no avail. The knife snaps off, and it scares the guy so bad he faints or whatever. After this, they go back to the Daily Star where Clark goes back, and we kind of meet Lois Lane for the first time. And the only thing that conspires is Clark asks Lois out on a date. They do go out on the date, and they end up having a good time. They end up, dancing and everything until, a drunk individual comes over and wants to have a dance with Lois Lane. His companions, kind of making the comment, hey, he's already she's already dancing with somebody. The drunk guy doesn't care. But they're just really showcasing, that Clark Kent is, making it seem that he's a weakling, that he can be walked over or whatever, which that's exactly what happens. The guy walks over and he's like, Clark, get out of the way, pushes Clark out of the way, and he tries to grab Lois, but we know Lois doesn't take no, but she ends up slapping the guy, telling him that he's out of line, blah blah blah. But she ends up getting mad at Clark because Clark didn't stand up for himself or for her. She ends up taking off in a cab because she's so mad. And Superman eventually kind of watches the bullies and stuff. We see him standing on a hill, and he's watching Lois Lane and the bullies leave the restaurant, or and we'll just say restaurant. Well, basically the bullies were not done. They eventually run into Lois, and they force her into their car. Superman sees all this, jumps down, ends up stopping the car, getting Lois out of the car after he gets pretty much everybody out of the car. That's where we see the definition of the cover right here, and Superman pretty much smashes the sedan into a million pieces. And then after that, grabs the one bully, and I would say it looks like he's fine, but he jumps really, really tall, giving this guy an atomic wedgie. And that's basically the end of that story. He leaves him on a telephone pole, and then he takes off. He goes after Lois to make sure she's okay, and they basically go to the next day. And Clark, goes into the Daily Star. His editor-in-chief now kind of informing him that the Daily Star is kind of getting boring and they're losing sales due to the boring stuff, saying that they had board games on their front page kind of thing. And he's stating that he needs to go they need to liven things up, and he sends Clark Kent to a war. It doesn't state what war or whatever. They just say it's some South American resistance or something like that. We do see Clark Kent hop on a train right here, but instead of going to the plane station or whatever, he ends up going to Washington, D.C. for reasons unknown. We do find out that he ends up overhearing a seedy conversation between a senator and some shifty individual. Superman trails the shifty individual, and we find out that that this shifty individual is bribing the senator into doing certain things. And they kind of set up that it has to do with this like South American resistance kind of thing. And that's basically where the story leaves off. Superman does grab this guy, and he kind of takes him all over town. Like, he even does this thing where he tries to hop over the White House building, and he overshoots it and misses. And it's kind of like just Superman taking this guy, I guess, trying to get him to confess, but he doesn't really do it. And that's kind of where the book leaves off. Just like Detective Comics, which it was another book that I was unaware did this, but this is also another book that also features many different stories in it. This one does it a little better. Like that Superman story was at least, I don't know, 7 pages long, something like that, when the Batman Detective story was about 3 pages long. I did have a chance to read some other of these stories, like Chuck Dawson. It was written by H. Fleming, and Chuck Dawson was really good. I'm not going to review that because that's not what I'm reviewing here. But there are some other stories here, like Zatar, Master Magician by Fred Gardner. And I'll showcase the next one. There is a big reason that the Western story is in black and white in the very beginning. It does offer a $25 cash prize to people that could color in the comic book the best, and they gave the $25 to 25 different people. Supposedly it was a cash contest, and they did quite a bit in the first couple issues of Action Comics, but they were trying to find colorists, which I thought was pretty neat. There's another story back here, Sticky Mitt Stimson. There's actually like an actual like paragraph story here with no comic. It's just like a book. But that's pretty much it. I've read like maybe 3 of the stories out of the 8 that are in here, and I want to say the first 2 are the best, the Chuck Dawson and the Superman. I wouldn't say Superman was definitely the better story, but that Detective versus Action Comics, I kind of like Detective a little more. Superman was a little wonky to what we're used to nowadays, but I mean that's where he started, right? It was all an evolution. We're talking about 84 years now, I think he's old, something like that. I don't know. But that is my review on Action Comics #1. It was just released this past week, so if if you're looking for it, it is out there. It's available to buy. It is a little bit pricey at $6.99, but that's not bad getting to read the first appearance of Superman kind of thing. But hey, that's my review. That's what I got to say about it. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let me down below. Have you ever read this before? What did you think about it? If you had never read it before, after me telling you what was going down in the first issue, I think one of my favorite things was the Jerome Shuster and the Superman could only jump 1/8 of a mile. I thought was kind of interesting. But hey, I'll let y'all go. Y'all have a great weekend, and I will see y'all later. Bye.